Welcome into Hammerstats, the Memorial Edition. Guess who? It's your favorite guru, otherwise known as Nikolai. I'm filling in for our fearless leader, Hammerjacks, who is somewhere on the road between Texas and Arkansas. But I know he's here in spirit, and he said I could take this baby for a spin. So here I am, joined by our good friend, Mr. Andy Lack of Pick the Pup Sport, and our special guest, Mark at Twitter handle golfbets101, and he is featured at waggleduff.com, and he is a member of the Breakdown Sports. Gentlemen, happy Memorial Day. How's it going?
It's great, man. Sorry. Thanks for having me, man. I was just finding the Twitter link and retweeting it, but I'm doing great, man.
Good. Nice to hear. And Mark, how about you?
Doing well myself. Had a nice weekend and ready to get some golf talk on the way.
I don't know about you guys, but I'm still a little sore from last week. How did you guys fare? I mean, there were some spots where I did okay, but as a whole, I feel like maybe I missed something because there was a lot of close calls, but I don't know if I missed something in the process or, it was just a rotten run of luck, but I'm just curious how you guys did.
I lost a unit, which is not great for me. It really came down to Matt Wallace and Matt Kuchar on Sunday between a winning week for me and a losing week for me. And both of those guys had super uninspiring Sundays and just finished right outside of the top 40. But I was disappointed as well. I mean, I tend to make my hay in the top 40 market. That's where I make my money on a week to week basis. But the outrights are always fun, even though they're not really for me like my general source of income. And if I tend to hit one, that's fantastic. If not, there's no sweat off my back. But yeah. I've been talking with Mark a bunch about this on Twitter, but I've just been struggling trying to see the top of the board lately and been really disappointed with my performance on outrights despite the top 40 plays being so good. So hopefully I can get that turned around this week and give everyone a winner.
I'm on board. I'll look forward to seeing what you got. And how about you, Mark?
I was up about a unit and a half. I basically rode Charlie Hoffman. I've been on Hoffman for a couple of weeks now. I had him top 10, top 20. He got both those for me. I kind of threw some units away, betting on some like deeper dives in the top 40 market, like Matthew Neesmith and like JT Poston. Guys I probably shouldn't have touched that I got tempted into. Neesmith, I got to stop. I got to blacklist him. I go to him on these types of courses all the time, and he's just throwing money away. So I was up about a unit and a half. It wasn't a great week. I had Jordan Spieth in one and done, so I actually fared pretty well. I'm doing pretty well in the race to the Mayo Cup, so that was at least rooting interest for the week.
Yeah, Naismith did me in too. He's not somebody I normally play, but he somehow ended up on my card too, and well, we all know how that went. Let's kind of work our way down towards the Memorial. But since I've got two pretty, respected gamblers on the show with me here, I'm always really curious about sports books with people because, you've got guys that play overseas. You've got guys that play in states where you can gamble. You've got guys that play in states where they can't gamble. And I'm just curious, where do you guys like to play?
Well, funny you should ask. I have a fantastic promo code for you guys at betus.com. Use promo code Pick the Pup. That's all lowercase, no spaces. Pick the Pup. Okay. Same as my Twitter handle and website to make it easy for you guys. But BetUS is an awesome website. It's a legal online sports book in all 50 states. They have some great numbers out already. Like I was referencing all of those numbers for the podcast that I just recorded with my guests for this weekend. Like they're hanging some pretty good ones. There's some, I would encourage everyone to shop around just in general, because I've seen a bunch of variants around the board with some of these guys, but BetUS is where I use, and you can use promo code Pick the Pup to get a 125% bonus on your first deposit.
Oh, very nice. How about you, Mark?
I live in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. I kind of float between the two states. So I'm mostly using DraftKings and FanDuel and some BetMGM. There's also a local that I use, but whenever I post picks, I always quote either FanDuel or DraftKings just because they're the most easily accessible for most people. So mostly the two main ones.
Gotcha. Okay. Just thought I'd ask. And do do you, I mean, are you pretty comfortable? Do you like shop around? I mean, like if there was a fantastic number at some book that you don't use, would you just go sign up and go get it? I mean, if you really wanted to bet it, or are you just going to stick to your guns with where you normally play?
Yeah, for me, because I have the access to the three, BetMGM, DraftKings, and FanDuel, there's usually a good amount of variance between those three, and I usually pick from those three. For example, even like for Memorial this week, I saw some numbers on DraftKings that weren't close to the market with some of the other books. So I quickly hopped on some of those numbers, but I think line shopping is incredibly important, especially for a sport like golf, because you can see variance of like 20, 30 points, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I live in California, so I don't have as good of an access as some of the legal sports book like DraftKings or FanDuel. But I have my guys in certain places. I've got some guys that I usually have the ability to kind of put in with the numbers that I want. And like Mark said, I would absolutely encourage that because this week and all weeks in general, you're going to see some variance with some of these guys. And for me, like the difference between somebody being 50-1 and 40-1, I mean, that's a big decision. Like that will make or break some of my plays. And, you know, I tend to get super locked into my guys before the numbers come out. So I'm not necessarily someone where I have no idea what I'm going to do. And then when the numbers come out, I just bet the guys that have the best numbers. But it does help me really decide, like, what am I going to do? How am I going to narrow it down? You have to find the best numbers on some of these guys. I think it's super important for winning long-term at this.
So you talked about locking into your guys, and I know it's easier to maybe bet on some of the majors, but how early, I guess, would you go looking for, you know, if a tourney was 3 months down the road? I mean, is that too early, or do you need to get earlier? Or, I mean, where would you, when would you start, and when would you recommend starting? And I guess it's a question I'll pose to both of you.
You want to go first, Mark?
Yeah, sure. I can hop in. I normally start a week in advance. So once the tournament, like once Memorial starts this week, I'm already done. I'm on to the next one. Usually on Thursday, because obviously it starts on Thursday or Wednesday night. And I usually start my week by kind of going through the scorecards of the former winners of the event, like the next event, and just trying to get an idea of like what stats to start looking at, what type of golfer, like what archetype, like what's the style of golfer that's going to fit that course. And then I start looking at like correlated courses, going through leaderboards of courses that I think are similar to that course. And then I go through course history also. And once I get all of that set, and then by Friday they announce the field, that's when I start digging into more of like the actual like modeling and the stats. But normally about a week in advance is when I usually start trying. And that's just the major. Major I usually try to get like about a month in advance.
Nice.
Yeah, same here. I do the exact same thing as Mark. As soon as I usually I finish all of my articles and podcasts on Wednesday morning, I usually play golf on Wednesday afternoon and then golf on Thursday morning. And then by Thursday night, I'm already deep into the next tournament. And same thing with the majors. I mean, I definitely, I don't go as far out as a month in advance, but what I try and do with majors is kind of like, you know, I'll keep a little bit of, keep like a note in my notes section. And anytime I think about something for an upcoming major, I just jot it down. And by the time we get to like a week out or 2 weeks out from the major week, I just look back on that sheet. And it turns out that I have a bunch of thoughts already. And, you know, obviously those markets are up all year. Like you can bet on the Masters, you can bet on the 2022 Masters as soon as the 2021 Masters is over. I typically don't tend to do that, although there is some huge advantage of doing that. You can also get burned that way as well. But I tend to want all of the data that I could possibly acquire before I'm going to fire off a play on someone like a couple months in advance, because golf, it's just such a volatile sport.
Sure.
You have no idea what can happen in the span of a month. But yeah, I'm with Mark. We both talk a lot about our processes and share kind of our similarities in what we do with each other. And we both kind of are on that, kind of getting into it a little bit of ahead of time. So by the time Monday comes around and the odds are already out, we kind of have an idea of where we're going.
That's probably been the biggest change in my own personal thing over the last maybe 12 to 18 months. I was probably more of a Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, but starting, you know, that whole Wednesday, Thursday, you know, even Friday, getting a lot of stuff done, by Friday, even, Saturday, depending on the tourney, that's probably been the biggest swing for me. So I definitely agree with you there. The extra time to be able to put in and not be rushed is huge, and versus just, flip a coin because, you're pressed for time trying to get the big numbers out there. So Mark, I know you mentioned, kind of stats and correlated courses. Do you, I guess we can just slowly tiptoe in. When you looked here, and I guess I'll make it sort of a two-parter, and you can run with it however you want to, and you can chime in on the back end, Andy, if you like. I'm sure you guys have seen the renovations that they've done over the last 2 years. I guess the first part would be, how do you think the renovations play into maybe kind of how the course is played historically? And then I don't want to, let you guys let everything out of the bag, but maybe if there's a course or two that maybe you looked at that you think other people might want to look at when doing their homework on this, and then maybe a stat or two that caught your eye as far as things to hone in on.
Yeah, so for me, I immediately thought of this course similar to be like Augusta. Just because it's a classical course, it's a second shot golf course. You're going to need a good approach game. You're going to need to be good around the green. It's bent grass, undulating green. So it's like a typical Nicklaus design. So that's why I looked first at Augusta. Then I looked at WGC Concession, which is where WGC Mexico was held this year, which was also a Nicklaus design. And you saw at that course, it was similar with the undulating greens, but a lot of people found trouble around the green. So there'd be big numbers coming up like double bogeys, triple bogeys, which is bad around the green play. So obviously around the green is one of the stats I'm definitely focusing in on this week. But I'd say Concession was a correlated course, Augusta, and then the 2020 Zozo, which is held at Sherwood. I saw a good amount of crossover among the top 25 leaderboards from the Memorial last year and that leaderboard from this past November. So those are the courses that immediately caught my attention. I did look a little bit at the American Express because that event has a partial course. One of them is a Nicklaus course. So mostly Nicklaus designs, but I also looked at the Travelers. It just seemed like a similar type of field goes to those two events. And it's just, for me, really focusing on a course where you're going to see a winning score somewhere around -13, -14, -15, and trying to like paint the picture from there.
Yeah, I'm with Mark. Listen, Augusta is a direct homage to, or Muirfield is a direct homage to Augusta. Jack has said that multiple times. Of course, the rough at Muirfield is a little bit longer, so it's not like perfect, right? It's more penal off the tee if you miss. But in terms of the second shot nature of it and kind of the pathways that you need to find to have success on both of those courses, it's very similar. There are a lot of long par fours. The par fives are extremely important. You always hear the week of the Masters, the guy that plays the par fives the best, that is generally the player that is going to win. I think that applies with Muirfield as well. And digging into the stats, that has bared true as well. Like top 10, top 5, and winners have all fared better on par fives than they have on par fours and par threes. You kind of have to survive all of these long par fours and a difficult set of par threes. And then it's so essential to get those birdies on the par fives. And, as is the case with Nicklaus courses, I don't know if they are, I grew up playing a Nicklaus course, and I don't know if they are just like Pete Dye in the sense where it's a lot of the same tricks and gimmicks. But what I can say about Nicklaus courses is that Nicklaus does have one major design element that is kind of the foundation of the way that he likes to design courses. And that's that he believes that the hole should get more difficult the closer that you get to the hole. So generally what you'll see with the Nicklaus course is it's pretty open off the tee. Relatively easy off the tee. Muirfield Village, for example, has very wide fairways, but the closer that you get to the hole, whether it be through hazards, whether it be through contouring, whether it be through extremely deep bunkers, which Muirfield Village has, whether it be through small greens, that is a staple of a Nicklaus course. It's that second shot that is really going to be so difficult for you. And that's why you see players like Justin Thomas and Morikawa tend to perform so well on Nicklaus courses.
I only wish I had remembered that when they played at the Concession. That's my only regret. I think I was all in the, I had the Daniel Berger Kool-Aid that week, and his around the green play, as I recall, or even putting as well, just was just abysmal, and that was probably my downfall. But I'm sure he'll make my shortlist this week. So speaking of shortlist, so I'm going to chop up the board a little bit. So I kind of looked around, and I guess maybe the guys from maybe around 10, if you really take a horrible number, maybe to about, say, 25. So I came up with a list about 8 guys, and I won't make you talk about all of them, but I'll get where I'm going with this in a second. So you've got Rom, you've got Spieth, you've got Rory, you've got Bryson, JT, Morikawa, Hovland, and Xander. And I'm going to push Cantlay off just for the second, just because he's a little further down. So I noticed, Mark, I know you put your card out on Twitter, and I don't want to spoil it, but I'm going to make people kind of go look at it so they can see who you're after at the moment. And if you haven't listened to Andy's Sunday early leans, I definitely encourage you to go to the pick the pup and follow the links and listen to it on your favorite platform. But it sounds like both of you guys have some, I don't want to say issues, but maybe you're not totally thrilled with the guys at the top of the board.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I'd say for me, similar to Andy, I haven't been reading the top of the board as well. I've been doing a lot better with like the 40 to 80 range. I've just been for whatever reason, I'm like most of my best plays have come from that range. So I don't want to waste a spot on a card on a guy that I'm just for whatever reason going to be wrong on that week. So I really didn't like a lot of the numbers up top. I'm not really into betting like 15 to 1s anyway, unless like usually only time I bet low is on a major or some really big event. For a normal like 120 field invitational, I think there's enough value down the board where I didn't have to start picking a number. There wasn't anybody that stuck out at like 20 to 1 that I needed to go grab. I saw Hideki at 22 to 1 in a lot of places, and I was a little bit upset with that because I wanted to get a better number. I found a better number, so I took Hideki at 30, but if you'd said at 22, I probably would have been out on him just because I didn't like going that low. But from the guys you listed, I'd say Xander really... I can't quit the guy. I really like him. He grades out well every single week. And I know Andy's probably going to talk about him also. I think people are kind of forgetting about Victor Hovland. Hovland played well at Concession. Hovland's played well at Augusta. Hovland is a good iron player. He struggles around the green, though. So that's going to be where his biggest issue is. But if I'm looking at the top of the board, I'd probably lean towards those two guys.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I like a lot of these players. I'm just not one of those guys. Like I see people out there that will bet, 10 players a week and half of them will be below 20 to 1. That's just not something that I do. So you have to take a stand on that. It's very, very rare that I will ever bet players or more than 2 players below 30 to 1, right? I'm generally looking to find one player in the 20 range and then go up above 30 from there, because I tend to, like Mark, I like to pepper that kind of 40 to 100 range and leave myself enough plays in there. So you have to take a stand on some of these guys. And I like Hovland here a lot. He's number 1 in my model this week. I don't have a bad word to say about him. He dominates par 5s. I think the short game narrative is a bit overrated as well. He's actually pretty good out of the sand, and he's gained strokes around the green in 3 straight starts. He's probably just going to be an 18 to 1 guy now. And, people just love betting him. I think he's one of those guys that people have such a hard time missing out on. You just can't bet them all. And it's probably Xander for me, right? Like I haven't pulled the trigger yet, but I just look at the fact that this course has some of the most deep and difficult bunkers on tour, right? That is one thing that I am absolutely confident about. This course also has 4 reachable par 5s that you need to score on. That is another huge thing for me, right? So you got bunkers and par 5s. Number 3 is long par 4s, right? This course has 7 long par 4s. So you need to survive those long par 4s. That's those are 3 big things. If you're not doing at least 1 or 2 of those things well this week, I don't see a scenario where you win this tournament. And Xander, he's the only player in this entire field that's top 10 in all of those things. He's first in this field in strokes gained par 5 over his last 36 rounds. He dominates par 5s, which is a skill, by the way. Like you have to pair good long iron play with decision making and up and down. And sure. Like he is good on par 5s. over a large sample size too. He's third in this field in sand saves. He's great out of the bunkers, and he's ninth in this field in long par fours. He's the only single player in this entire field that rates out that highly in those three things. And, if I'm going to do all of this research and kind of make a stand on what I think is going to be important here, my hands get kind of tied with a player like Xander, who just does all of those things so well.
And you've mentioned it. I mean, I've listened to, a lot of your stuff, and basically, you end up chasing, guys with a lot of, good all around game. And it seems like another course where you're going to really need a pretty strong all around game. And, he ranks out pretty well, across the board. And if he's number one in your model, I mean, you got to chase him, or at least have a little bit of action for sure. So I know you said you had Decky at 30, so I won't, put you guys on the spot to, hit the top, but I'll use 25 as the mark. So drifting down from 25 to say maybe 60, is there one guy, or even if you want to go two, it's okay with me. Is there a guy or two in there that you really like, or, suggest maybe watching out for? Whether you bet it or not, it's not my thing. It's just, maybe somebody to take a look at, depending on what kind of odds you get.
Yeah, so for me, like I said, if you could find the 30 on Hideki, I like that number. But outside of that, Patrick Reed, I see a lot of like 35, 34 on him. He's a great short game player. We all know that. He's actually good on longer courses also, which is surprising for a guy. You don't really think of him as like a driver of the golf ball. He just plays them really well. He's really good on par fives. And all it has to do with his ability to just get it closer to green, and then from there, just take over with his short game. And then like a knockoff version of Patrick Reed would be Cameron Smith, who you can get at 55. I'm on both those guys this week for similar reasons. Cam Smith is number one in all of the PGA Tour on par 5 birdie or better. You wouldn't really think of a guy like that as that. But like I said, these short game players, they really take advantage of these par 5s, because even if they don't get an eagle because they're not there on 2, they're at least getting the birdie. Right. They're able to really capitalize on on the par 5s. And I know Andy was saying par 5s are going to be huge. Over the last 5 years, the winners of this tournament have averaged 9 under par on the par 5s. So you Big really number. Do, for this tournament, you do need to score on the par 5s and on the par 4s. The par 4s, I think, were about 4 under on average over the last 5 years. The par 3s are going to be a little bit of an issue. So I'm really looking at guys who can score on these par 5s and kind of take advantage of their best parts of their game, which is going to be the around the green. That's what I'm really focusing on this week.
I like a lot of guys in this range. I guess I'll start with Finau, who, I just think this is such a perfect course for him. I know he finished 20th at Colonial last week, but he struck the ball so well. It was actually his best off the tee week in over a month. It was his best approach week since Riviera. I bet him last week, and he actually would have been, so I was following him closely. He actually would have been right in the mix to win that tournament had he not lost 4 strokes putting. It was following on him on Shot Tracker. It was a lot of Tony Finau sticks an approach to 8 feet and misses the birdie putt. And, I just look at a guy, I look at some of these players that have lost 3.5 strokes putting or more, or some of these guys that are good putters. I think Tony Finau is actually an underrated putter. I would call him a good to volatile putter. And Finau lost 4 strokes putting last week. Now, Finau's only done that 2 times since the start of 2020. And in both occasions, he came back the next week and gained 2.4 strokes putting and 4.6 strokes putting and almost won that tournament. So you look at some of these players that are good putters. When they have a bad putting week, like Finau just did, they usually don't go back to 0. Like sometimes they'll follow it up with just like an absolutely spiked putting week. And it makes sense too. They're probably spending more time focusing around on the putting green that week with their coaches, right? They feel comfortable with their ball striking. Tony Finau's ball striking has been awesome. He's always played well at Muirfield Village before. And you see it all the time where it's like Jordan Spieth had his worst putting week of the season at the PGA Championship, comes back the next week, gains 7 strokes putting and almost wins Colonial. Colin Morikawa loses 7 strokes putting at the Genesis. He doesn't go back to 0. He goes all the way up to +4 and wins the concession. So I tried to see if there was any correlation there between guys that are pretty good putters and volatile putters and how they respond after a bad putting week. And they usually actually spike up pretty high.
Really?
So Yeah, so I'm pretty in on Tony Finau. I know he's kind of a squeamish outright bet. I totally understand that, but I would be shocked if he doesn't have a good week.
I mean, he's got like what 4 top 15s here, and Mark touched on the Nicholas tourney course at Amex, and I think Finau's the course record holder. I think he's like a 63 or something. So maybe he's got some Nicholas juice in his veins, and if he bounces back like you suggest, he's probably pretty live. And and if the odds are down there a little bit, and it seems like they are at a lot of books, then he's probably a pretty good bet too. So in that range, I'm going to cheat a little. So I've seen your card, Mark, and I listened to your show on Sunday, Andy. Have you come around a little on Bradley? Or are you still kind of on the fence, or where are you at today? I know it's Monday, and I realize Tuesday and Wednesday are still ahead of us, but that was going to be one of my early questions. I was just curious to hear you guys maybe debate.
I'll let Mark go first because I know he's in on him, and I'm on the fence.
Yeah, so no matter which way I tried like changing my model this week, Keegan Bradley came up like top 3 almost every single time. Whether I changed it to last 24, I did the entire season, all rounds for the entire 2021 season, he was still number 2. And I don't normally just go based off the model, but essentially this week I was really looking for a really good tee to green player and a really good around the green player. And you just blindly look at those two and just put them in your fantasy national model and just 50% both of them, Keegan Bradley's going to be number 1. So at a really basic level, he just fit the mold of a guy I was looking for. He's really good tee to green. He struggles with his putter. So you have to know what you're getting yourself into. You can't bet on him and then complain on Thursday that he missed a 5-footer because you should know that's coming anyway. But for me, I was on him a couple weeks ago where he got runner-up to Sam Burns. So he's been trending really well. He played well again at the PGA Championship. I feel like he's kind of just like been hot all season. Yeah. And this is the kind of course where he maybe doesn't have to rely on his putter as much, kind of really just take advantage of his around the green play and take advantage of his approach play.
Yeah, I mean, Mark brings up some great points, and I struggle with these guys like Keegan Bradley and Corey Connors and Cameron Tringali and Chris Kirk and Charlie Hoffman, where I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, and I keep wondering if a regression is going to happen because Keegan Bradley is a good player. And he actually was a great player early in his career, but he's also had seasons throughout the late 2010s where he just wasn't very good. So what we're seeing with Keegan is you could make the argument that this is some of the best play of his career. Yeah. The thing that I worry about is he on the wrong side of a run? And I'm not sure because he actually gained 4.1 off the tee and 3.9 on approach at Kiowa. I know he finished 17th, but he was actually better. That was his second best week off the tee and his second best approach week of the entire season as well. So you could make the argument that he's actually still trending upwards. The issue is, as Mark has mentioned, the putting. Can Keegan make enough putts to win a golf tournament? I talked about spike putting weeks, right? And I talked about spike approach weeks as well. I just worry, and I talked about how, I guess this was on another podcast, but I was talking about how, you see certain guys where they'll gain 7 strokes on approach in a week. And there's certain players on the PGA Tour, like they'll go their entire career without doing that. Like they just don't have that in their bag. I just worry that Keegan doesn't have 4 strokes putting like in his bag. I think he's done it 10 times in his entire career. And the last time was in 2018, when he came second at the Valspar. I don't have it off the top of my head. I could check it out, but I think he gained like a stroke or 2 putting and just was unbelievable from tee to green. So he's got to, I'm close with him. Like I really, really, really like him. There are 2 other guys at similar numbers where I'm deciding between those 3 and I'm going to end up betting 2 of them, but he's absolutely on my short list.
So just taking a sidestep for a second. So, and it's for both of you too. So you mentioned a run. I mean, how long does a run last in your estimation? I mean, is it more, 2-3 weeks? Are you talking like 5-6 weeks? I mean, what's your idea of a run, I guess?
I wish I had the answer. That's what I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to figure out if this is ever going to end.
I mean, I've asked that to a handful of people, and I get different answers all the time. And it seems like, I either jump off 1 week, early, or I'm 1 week late. And I'm going to keep asking until I get some answers I like. But I just thought I'd throw it out there. You have a stand on that, Mark?
I feel like for me, a lot of what I tend to look at first is the season long stats, because that's your longest data sample for the most relevant season, obviously.
Mhm.
And then kind of trying to parse through using last 24, last 36 type of models and see how far are they off their baseline? Where should they be? Are they this type of golfer just this season? Like, I mean, you can look at a guy like Charlie Hoffman, who's played great this season. Is this like Andy said, is this who he is? I mean, look at Harris English last year. We thought that might be Harris English for a little bit, and then he's just completely fallen off. So at one point, a regression is going to come for a guy who's just outperforming so well, unless this is what they are going to be, and this is what they're going to be going forward. So maybe a guy like Keegan has found something, and he's getting more confident. Maybe all it is confidence for some of these guys. You can look at a guy like Rory, who just really needed to get back to a place where he just felt like he was the best golfer in the world, and then he goes to Quail Hollow and you win. So maybe some of it isn't always going to be just, are they just striking their irons well? It's like, do they have the confidence to strike it well? So I feel like a lot of handicapping is kind of just watching the golf also and looking to see, like, you can see a guy like JT last week, he just wasn't there, like mentally, just for whatever reason, just checked out. So I feel like that's part of it also.
So kind of bringing it full circle, going back to Bradley for a second. So if you don't bet him outright, is he somebody you'd consider lower down the board for a top 10, top 20, top 40 if the number made sense? And if it made sense, what's that number?
For Bradley?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely. I think he's a great. I mean, DFS, it depends on ownership, but
sure.
I mean, I think he's as safe as a bet as you'll find in this price range to probably make the cut and play well. He definitely has my interest in the finishing position market.
Gotcha. You have him just as an outright mark, or you have him a little?
I usually tend to bet my entire outright card in top finishing markets also. So normally what I tend to do is I just try to find plus money in any of my outright golfers. So if I bet a guy at like 55-1, or like 50-1 with Keegan in this example, I'll probably be able to get him probably close to like even money, maybe like plus 110, plus 115 at top 40. I'll bet that. I'll bet him top 30. I'll bet him top 20. And a lot of with the top finishing is, if I think they're good enough to win outright, I obviously think they're good enough to finish top 40 and top 30. But a lot of it has also to do with like the type of golfer I'm betting on. A guy like Keegan, he's made like 10 or 11 straight cuts. He hasn't missed a cut since like last November. So I feel relatively safe with betting him in those markets. But a guy like Siwoo Kim, who's also on my card, he's a little bit more volatile. So maybe I'm not going to bet him in the top 40, top 30, but I'd bet him top 20. Because I know if he does show up this week, he's showing up this week. It's not going to be like a middling T28 type of a week.
I know you guys don't normally go the top of the card and take the low numbers, but when you get to the finishing positions, your top 20, 30, 40, whatever floats your boat. I mean, do you just stick with plus numbers, or do you bet some, minus odds every now and again? Like, do you have like a minimum limit you look for or whatnot?
I kind of will go up to like minus 120. I played Emiliano Grillo last week to finish top 40 at minus 120. That's probably the lowest odds, I guess you'd say, that I would get. I know, like, I have a couple friends, like the Better Golf Podcast guys, like they're a little bit more adventurous. They'll go up to minus 150. I'm not against that by any means. I don't tend to do it. I tend to, like, for example, if, I'm high on Tony Finau this week, and I kind of have the same structuring in place as Mark, like Tony Finau to finish in the top 40. This is just a guess, but I think he's would probably be close to like minus 200, if not a little bit more. So I'll look and see if I could get closer to even money on like a top 20. And then I kind of just let it dictate. I like my top 40 plays to be in between like minus 120 and plus 200.
Kind of the same way, Mark?
Yeah, mostly the same way. For me, I will also go to like the minus 120. I feel like that's usually my cutoff. And that usually depends on the field. So if we have a smaller field, like 120 golfers, I would be more likely to go there, just because there's less golfers. So you have a higher percentage chance of getting into it. So the odds are going to dictate that. So I feel like most of the time it's pretty much field dependent, but I'm usually in that same like minus 120 plus 200, maybe plus 250 if I'm really feeling a certain golfer that week. But after watching Naismith and Poston last week, maybe I'll cool off on doing that for the top 40.
At least this week, right?
Yeah.
All right. So I'll get back to the board a little bit. So I'll kind of zone in on maybe that, we'll say 60. I realize it could change depending on which book you use and which set of odds, but maybe that 60 to 100 mark. You guys have a golfer or two you like in there?
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, so the only golfer that I really felt good about was Siwoo Kim, and I know he just withdrew last week, so I don't really know what was going on with him, but he plays long par fours really well. If you look at par four, 450 to 500 yard efficiency, he was 10th of all PGA Tour players, so he really does do well on these long par fours, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that he's good around the green, like I mentioned with the longer holes on like par fives also, is when you get, like even what Andy mentioned, you get closer to this hole, it gets harder. That's why I want these good around the green players. Siwoo Kim's great around the green. He's also got the ability to have a crazy spike week. He won the Amex, which was partial Nicklaus course, so he does have that going for him also. I think this is a kind of a week where you see a guy like Siwoo who just comes out of nowhere, or you see a guy from the top of the board. So I liked him at 100 to 1. I was kind of surprised he was that long. I think might have had to do with him withdrawing last week, but
Right.
I'm not going to be betting him top 40, top 30. I'm going to be betting him to win and betting him maybe top 20. So I'm not going to be overexposed to him. It's going to be more of just like I think he's going to go off and spike this week, or he's just going to miss the cut. It's not a lot of like in between.
All or nothing. I like it. How about you, Andy?
Are we doing guys kind of up to 100, or do you want me to
Somewhere in that range? You know, I'll leave it up to you. You know, because
I got a lot of yeah.
I mean, I just kind of usually, I figure I got the top of the board and try to break that, say 25, 30 range up to 100 kind of in half. And I just kind of did a quick look and kind of took like an, average. And it seemed like 60 was kind of a good break because you start to get some guys at that 65, 70. And then there's that cluster between 80 to 100. So just a, guy or two, maybe, that catches your eye in there.
Yeah. So a player that has really grown on me as the week has gone on has been Mark Leishman. I think Leishman is a really smart play this week. I don't expect him to be very popular, but if you look at what Leishman struggles with, it's the driver. And I think that's fine here. These are some of the biggest fairways on tour, and he's a little bit better in good drives gained than he is in strokes off the tee, which basically tells me that, yeah, he's not great off the tee, but he's not incredibly loose, right? And the situation with Muirfield Village is, you don't want to be in the trees or in the thick rough, but you have some room in terms of these fairways. It's not like playing the Sony Open, right? Like their fairways are pretty wide, right? And what Leishman is incredibly good at is his long irons, and he's awesome out of the sand too, right? And so I look at a player like Leishman who always plays well at this course, right? He hasn't missed a cut here since 2011. The irons are really starting to come around. He's not going to look good in models because his two best events of the year were the team event and the Masters, which isn't going to show up in Fantasy National. But, he's unbelievable at this out of the sand and an unbelievable iron player as well. And the putting's really kind of coming around too. So I think Leishman is a player that I probably looked past at the beginning of the week, and I'm way more inclined to bet now once I got into it a little bit more. I have to make a decision between, I'm probably going to end up betting two of Woodland, Leishman, and Bradley.
That's a tough call for me here.
Maybe Adam Scott too. I really like Adam Scott.
That class works. I mean, especially at a tough place. So, I mean, it's always kind of a, something I keep in my back pocket just to look at. If you can get somebody that's got it at, a deeper price, it's always worth something. And I can't say Leishman had, was on my radar, but just quickly looking right here, I kind of see a little bit of what you're talking about. And I think it's, I think it's 4 top 15s in the last 7 years. So obviously, he can get around the place a little bit. I heard you mention on your cast, which was funny, and I'm going to ask, and, I said I wasn't going to try to, I want people to go, check it out. Cause again, you put the time, you put the effort in, and you make a lot of good points, but you did kind of bring up my boy, Gary Woodland on there. And he was kind of somebody that showed up on my radar, and I really wasn't expecting him there, but I guess I was a little disappointed because I thought the odds were kind of short, but are you cooling? I guess he's kind of at the lower end of that. I don't know. I think I've seen him as low as maybe 45 now, but I've seen some still. He's in that maybe 55, 60, 65. So I'm just going to loop him in here. Have you cooled on him a little, or you're still considering somewhere?
I'm definitely considering Woodland. 45, no thanks for me, but
Yeah, for sure.
But I saw 66. I don't have the odds checker thing up with me right now, but 66, I love that. I do really, 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 really like Gary Woodland this week. The irons are really starting to come around. He gained 2.8 on approach at Colonial, 6.1 at the PGA, and 3.6 at the Wells Fargo. He's starting to putt well too. Really good out of the sand. He loves this course. He's said before that he loves this course. I try and look at all of the quotes. The driver's starting to come around too, 2.9 strokes off the tee at Colonial. He's 7th in proximity from 200 yards plus, and I think that is a stat that is going to come more into play here with the renovation and all those par fives that you're going to have those long irons in on. So I really do like Woodland this week. I just, you can't bet them all. So I still have to make kind of that decision. I think it's a really great range. Like, I think you can make a very compelling argument for Kevin Streelman. I have a good argument for Adam Scott. Neiman's at 55-1. So, obviously Charlie Hoffman at 55-1 is a no for me, but he's been playing so well too. Sungjae Im at 55-1. That's a big number on Sungjae for a guy that is a really volatile player and can turn things around really quickly. So I still have some decisions to make in that range.
It sounds like you've got some tough cuts, my friend, and your outright card, you're coming out Wednesday morning.
Yeah, that'll be out Wednesday morning. By Wednesday morning, I will have like a very long-winded run-on sentence infused rant on about 6 to 10 players.
I'll have my 300 milligram cup of caffeinated coffee ready to go, so I can sit down, take some notes, see what you got. And I know you've got your card out on Twitter, Mark, just with your outright. So are you going to add to it, or is that about where you think you're going to end up?
Yeah, I normally stick with 5 golfers each week. I normally add on majors, so 5 tends to be the magic number for me. Like Andy mentioned earlier, I don't really like betting like 10 guys and then betting like a tenth of a unit. I like betting on my guys when I'm betting on them, be in on them and have a conviction on those 5 golfers. I will say, I was going to ask Andy what he thought about Mark Leishman, because I have to catch up on all my podcasts. I'm a little bit behind, so I haven't had a chance to listen yet. But I saw an 85 on Leishman on DraftKings, and I thought that was a mistake. I was like, did they mean to put that? Because it was like 50 everywhere else. So he was the last guy I cut out of my card. I honestly went with Cam Smith at 55 over Leishman at 85. So I definitely will probably be on him in top finishing markets. But on Tuesdays is when I normally post my top finishing card on Twitter also. So I'll probably have a whole card out with like top 40s, top 30s, and top 20s. And I'll probably have 2 articles out or 3 articles out by Wednesday on Waggle Duff and the Breakdown Sports.
Very cool. Couple things, and then I will let you guys drift off into continued research and card cutting for the rest of the week. Do you guys dabble much beyond, like, say, 100-1? I mean, like, if something makes sense and the research checks out, or you mainly stick to the? I mean, I guess as far as outrights, I mean, I know you guys are bigger into the top 20, top 30, top 40, and it'd be tough to really find a 100-1 shot out there. But as far as outrights and whatnot, are you pretty much just zone in on your couple of guys as far as the outrights, and then just take the plus money on your top 20, top 30, top 40 guys when you see them?
There's one guy at 110-1 that I may end up betting that I actually think can win this tournament.
Save that for Wednesday. I'm looking forward to reading that. That'll be good.
Okay, I won't say a word about it.
No. But see, so you do. So you if you see a guy that makes some sense and thinks he's got a shot, you're gonna throw some money down that way. Nice.
Literally, it would be not even 0.1 of a unit. It would be 0.005 of a unit. But yeah, I'm like Mark. I like picking 5 guys pretty much between 20-1 and 100-1. If there's a 6 guy, he will be 100-1 or higher, and it will be a very, very, very small exposure to him. Like, I bet Tom Hoagie last week at 200-1. Obviously that didn't work out. There is one guy that I'm weighing that I have my eye on. That's 110-1. He's 110-1 on a book I found, and he's actually 65-1 on FanDuel. I don't know if he's 110-1 golfer in my opinion, but I'm generally with Mark where it's 5 for me. and I like doing 6 sometimes, but that 6 guy is 100 plus and at very small exposure.
And I'm going to ask Mark, and I know the answer to this from Andy just because I've listened to him. So do you play the props and first round leaders much, or you stick to, you're pretty dedicated to, your 5, your main outright guys, and then the top 20, top 30, top 40 guys as you get the plus money and whatnot?
Yeah, for me, I always felt like first round leader is always like just throwing darts at a board and hoping one sticks. So for me, I don't really get into first round leader. A lot of it is going to be just getting exposure in the top 40, top 30 markets and some top 20s. And then if I find a golfer that is over 100 to 1, I don't tend to bet outright over 100 to 1. So I normally feel pretty convinced that most of the winners are under 100 to 1 for a reason. It's because that they're likely to win, and 100 to 1 you're not likely to win, like not at all likely to win. So I tend to bet those longer odd guys just in the top 40 market, just so I can say like I had a good feeling for them this week, and I knew that they were going to perform, but they probably weren't going to win. A guy like that this week, he's Benny On. He just loves this course, and I saw him at 320 to 1 at FanDuel. I didn't even post on my Twitter that I was betting on him outright, but I mean, like I put like $4 on him, so to win like $1,200 if he somehow wins this week. I figured he's a guy who's lost in a playoff here. He's a great around the green player. I just thought 320 was kind of crazy. I'm probably going to have him top 40 when those odds come out on FanDuel. But I tend to mostly stick to finishing positions and outrights. And then it's more of like a joke at this point than something serious. But every single Wednesday night, I'll post a 3-ball matchup parlay. I'll put like 10 guys in a parlay for like $1 to win like $5,000. It's just kind of just fun. It's my Thursday sweat instead of doing first round leaders.
Nice. I like it. I have to check out this week. So you mentioned it, and it gives me a pretty good segue into my last topic of choice for the evening. So matchups. How do you guys approach them? I mean, do you just look for odds, or do you look for guys, or, if you find a guy and the odds you like, I mean, do you go with the form and the, strokes gained stats and the course history, or just kind of walk me through your matchup process?
I love matchups. I typically like I kind of finalize my card and start writing my article all day Tuesday when I really kind of lock in my bets. So I haven't gotten a huge chance to look at the matchups. In fact, some of them don't even release till late on Monday night or Tuesday morning. But yeah, matchups like top 40s is really where I make my bread and butter. The main thing that I'm really trying to look for is there a huge discrepancy here between somebody in my model, versus, a guy that's super high in my model or versus a guy that's super low in my model. There are certain golfers every week, and Spencer Aguiar does a great job of talking about this. I talk with him about this all the time, is finding those guys that you kind of try and want to pick on, right? And so there's usually 1 or 2 guys that I have earmarked where, I look at their numbers and, I don't see it for them this week. I think they're probably overvalued at their price. And if I can find a matchup where I can fade them and the guy on the other side is somebody that I'm generally at least more high on, I'll look to do that. I'm generally playing like between 1 and 3 full tournament matchups per week. Sometimes 0, sometimes 4. It just depends on what I see that I like. Sometimes these books, like, they don't give you good ones. I really just let the market kind of dictate. Sometimes the matchups are really, really sharp and you're not able to find those edges. So I look through all of them on like first thing on Tuesday morning, and there's kind of pick between 0 and 4 that I really like.
How about you, Mark?
Yeah, I'm not too big on full tournament matchups. I tend to do
single rounds
better with like the individual rounds, and normally on Thursday and Friday rounds, because at that point the groups haven't adjusted for how they've played that week. So you tend to see a little bit more value in finding a guy you like pre-tournament, maybe playing well for the first 2 days, or at least being able to spike for a day. But for full tournament matchups, it tends to be golfers who are too short for my outright card. So a guy like Xander this week, who I didn't bet at 20 to 1, who I liked, who I think is going to have a good week, I might look to find him in a matchup against somebody who I am a little bit more fading. So I tend to see matchups more. I tend to fade people more than bet on guys. And if I'm betting on guys, it's just guys that were just too short for my outright card.
then I guess you gave me another segue that I just kind of ask on the fly because I didn't think about it. Do you guys jump into buy the dip? Somebody has a terrible first round, and you get into the live betting. If somebody like pre-tourney, say 20-1, and all of a sudden he hits 50-1. If you think he's still got some juice and a shot at a round 2 comeback, and maybe make some noise on the weekend.
I don't typically tend to add live outrights, although I know some people that do that and are very successful at doing it. I do so much work before these tournaments with my guys that my guys are what they are. What I'll look to do instead is I will look to do, like Mark said, round to round matchups where I'll study the strokes gain data and I'll look to play on guys that are hitting the ball really great or hitting the ball, they're putting way below their baseline or something like that, and look to add in tournament matchups. I probably should maybe consider the idea of, saving more bullets for the live outright ads. It's just not something I really tend to do. Of course, if there's a situation where I have my guy in a hedging opportunity, I will do that, right? Like I do believe that hedging is smart. I'm not against hedging. So if I have a guy in the mix, I will absolutely hedge. But I look at the strokes gain data after every round, and I'm usually looking at like round to round matchups more so than adding players to my outright card. But that's just because I have all of my exposure down already. I have those like 8 units down between my outrights and all my top 40 plays. And I don't really have too many more bullets, but I know people that do very, very well at it. So I've definitely thought about kind of going a little bit lighter pre-tournament and kind of considering that as more of a serious option.
More of the same, Mark?
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same way. Once the tournament starts, I've already had all in my brain, like what could happen this week. Like if so-and-so does bad, where am I going to be unit wise? And I'm kind of like focused in on like, all right, this is what I put in play. This is what I'm exposed to. I'm just going to leave it at that. And I mentioned earlier, once it gets to like Thursday, I'm not even thinking about this. I'm watching it for the pleasure. I enjoy watching golf, but I'm not really thinking about it that same way. I'm already thinking about the next week. I'm already thinking about like getting an idea and getting a grip on what it's going to, like who I'm going to be betting on next week. So I'm not really focused on the pure strokes gain data from how did Jordan Spieth play on Thursday afternoon. I'm not really as keen to it. And I like it that way because then I can actually sit back and enjoy the tournament. I'm not chasing. I'm not trying to get creative and start overthinking things. I kind of just get to be a golf fan at that point.
All right, because talking to you makes me, both of you guys, makes me continually think of something. So I lied. So there's one more. So it sounds like from week to week, you pretty much stick to the same unit count. You don't really veer too much. I mean, maybe you might go a smidge down if you just don't find something interesting, or perhaps if you find that one interesting bet, maybe you go a smidge up, but you're pretty close to the same number every week.
Yeah, I'm usually 8 to 10. Usually closer to 8. I did 12 for the PGA. That was probably a mistake. I got out of there with a winning week, but that was probably a mistake. I'll probably allow myself to go to like 10 for majors, but it's usually 8. And what I will do sometimes is I will add the occasional in tournament matchup if I have time to kind of do that research. But and then, by the tournament's end, if you add 1 or 2 of those, the whole week ends up being like 10 or 12. But I'm kind of like Mark. It just depends if I have time to do that, because I think you can have such an advantage getting ahead for the next week and getting that extra time on the next week that I almost sometimes would rather spend my time on Thursday and Friday and Saturday that way. So it really just depends. But pre-tournament, I'm usually locked into that kind of 8 range.
Good number.
Yeah, I'm a little bit bigger. I'm usually 10 to 15. I always have about exactly one unit in the outright market, and then I tend to vary in the top finishing markets, and that's basically because of how much plus money I can find on my outright card. If I'm betting smaller that week, if I'm betting 3 guys that are 30 to 1, I'm not going to find a lot of value betting top 40s and top 30s. So I'll probably only have like 8 units, 7 units that week. But if I'm betting guys who are in that 50, 60, 70, 80 to range, and a couple of them, I tend to get more top 40s, more top 30s, and a little bit more top 20 action. So I'd say tend to be like in that 10 to 15 range. A major, I normally get closer to 15. I'll start adding some guys. Like I think I've bet Louis Oosthuizen top 30 every single major for the last year. Like just a unit I'm already throwing out there just before it even starts already. Now I'm going to be betting on Louis. So I feel like 10 to 12 on a normal tournament, and a lot of it's information based also. A tournament like the Byron Nelson, where it was a new course, they haven't played it, and a tournament like the team event or the match play, there's not a lot of information and good information on it. I'll be smaller, but if it's a normal tournament, like we've got information on who's going to perform well and how you can perform well here, I'll tend to give myself a decent amount of exposure in the top finishing markets.
Definitely curious to see what you guys come up with for the Palmetto at Congaree. So I will leave it there for now. So Mark, you said the content's coming out on the 2 articles are coming out tomorrow.
Yeah,
Or did you say Wednesday?
I'll have my outright card with all. I already posted my card, but I'll have an article on Waggleduff tomorrow where I explain why I'm betting on those guys and a little bit of a course preview with it. And then I'll have an article out with breakdown tomorrow, which is kind of just like a golfers to target article. I kind of go about 15 golfers just from across the odds boards to just people who I think you should at least consider.
Nice.
Just really like a 3-4 sentences on each golfer. And then on Wednesday, I post a best bets article on the breakdown, which is my 2 favorite outrights, 3 or 4 of my favorite top finishing plays, and then 2 or 3 matchups that I really like.
Beautiful. Definitely check it out. Andy, I know you've got the good stuff coming, but I know that you're normally all around the map these days. So where can we find you next, maybe tomorrow? You've got to be on somebody's podcast or something tomorrow somewhere, I'm sure.
I've got a great podcast coming out tomorrow morning. It should be out around noon Eastern time, 1 p.m. Eastern time. I had Stephen Hennessy on, who is the editor. Yeah, is the editor of Golf Digest. He's actually my former boss and a good pal of mine. And we, a little bit different than usual, we spent about 30 minutes of the podcast sharing our memorial picks. And then the back half of the podcast, he's actually the overseer of the Golf Digest top 100 courses ranking. And they just released their new top 100 courses ranking for the 2021-2022 season. So if you have any interest in golf courses, we have like an incredible conversation in the back end of that podcast where we basically just kind of nerd out over golf courses and share their favorite golf course memories and the best golf courses that we've ever played. And I basically just kind of ask him a bunch of questions on that. So that was a really fun podcast for me. And of course, for the memorial, we do a bunch of really good memorial stuff at the beginning as well. And then, like I said, Wednesday morning, I'll have that reasoning and analysis article out, and that should do it for me.
I'm looking forward to seeing what both of you guys have, and definitely checking out the back end of the podcast. I may start with the last 30 minutes to catch the golf course updates for the list this year, and then go back and catch memorial picks. But I appreciate you guys coming on, and best of luck with your cards this week. And here's hoping we cash big and can do this again sometime soon.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Did you get all that? If not, make sure you head over to hammercast.com, subscribe, and join the Hammer Nation. Until next time, keep grinding.